Hi guys and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about loops in Python. There are two types of loop. One that allows us to repeat some code a certain number of times, and one that allows us to repeat code for as long as a condition is true. Let's start with that one in this video. So we've got our code from the last video here where we ask the user whether they want to play, and then if the user's input was Y, we asked them to guess our number, and then we told them whether the number was correct, the number being defined up here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the game over and over until the user asks us to stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this prompt a little bit before we begin, and I would say, would you like to play? And then I will give them the options of Y in capital or N in lowercase. This is a common convention in terminal-based programs where you use one of the options as uppercase and one of them as lowercase, and that means that if they type anything other than N, Y will be the default. So they have to specifically type N if they want to stop. This is a common convention, so you can use this in your own programs as well. What that means is that now we want to repeat this code here, allowing the user to guess a number and then telling them whether it's wrong or not, for as long as the user didn't type N. So if the user types anything except N, we want to run this code. So we no longer need this if statement there. But what we want to do is we want to use a while loop. So we will say while the user input is not N, so while user input is not N, then we will repeat this code over and over. What happens here is that we've got the while keyword, then we've got a space, and then we have our condition, more or less like the if statement we had earlier on, but now this code here makes the indented code run over and over, and what happens is it starts up at the top and it goes to the bottom, and then when it reaches the end of this block that's indented, it goes back to the top and evaluates this boolean again. So if this boolean is true, then it will run this again, and then it will go back to the top and evaluate the boolean again, and so on. Of course, the first time that Python reaches line 4, this boolean is also evaluated, so potentially the user could enter N to begin with, and then this loop would not run at all. So that is how the while loop works. Now, of course, if the user enters Y, then Y would not be equal to N, that's true, so this would run. And then we will go back to the top, and this would still be Y. And it still wouldn't be equal to N, so this would run again, and so on forever. If you don't change the condition here, then you're going to end up in an infinite loop. So what we have to do to begin with is we have to ask the user whether they want to play again. So what we'll do is we will copy this line here, just for now, and we will put it inside the loop, but not inside the else. So just down here in the same indentation level as all the other lines, we ask the user whether they want to play again. And what that means is that when we go back to reevaluate this condition, the user can potentially affect that and potentially terminate the loop. However, there is a small issue in here, which is that you have these two lines duplicated. So if you ever want to change your prompt, for example, you're going to have to change it in both places, and that can be a little bit cumbersome. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of it and introduce another Python keyword that allows us to do that. Here I'm going to change this so it no longer uses the condition. Instead I'm going to do while true. This always creates an infinite loop. So now this code will run, and then we will go back to the top. This is still true, so it runs again, and so on forever. If you use while true, then you must be able to terminate the loop from within the loop's code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this line into the loop. And then after the line, I'm going to say if user input is equal to N, and here comes the break keyword. The break keyword allows us to exit a loop. So because we're inside a loop here, we can break out of it, and that terminates it and continues our Python code from the next line after the loop. So what we've done here is within the loop, we ask the user whether they'd like to play, and if they type no, then we terminate. And if they type anything else, then we continue with the loop. And that happens over and over. This is an alternative way of doing the loop that you saw just a moment ago. You can do either. This one does reduce duplication, but it adds an extra if statement inside your loop. So it's up to you which one you want to do. Usually though, I would go for something like this. That's everything I wanted to show you regarding the while loop, so let's take a look at the for loop. Let's say you've got a list of your friends, Rolf, Jen, Bob, and Anne, and you want to print out a simple string for each friend. For example, you want to print out Rolf is my friend, Jen is my friend, Bob is my friend, Anne is my friend. The simple way to do that without loops is of course to do something like print friends 0 is my friend, and then repeat that for 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, as the list of friends grows, this gets increasingly difficult. Plus, if you have this list as part of a program and you want to be able to print out that all your friends are your friends, you're not going to be able to do that without changing the code. So here's where the loop comes in handy. We're going to repeat this structure for each of your friends. So what we'll do is we will say for friend in friends, and then we will indent this piece of code, and here we will use the variable friend. How the for loop works is you have the for keyword, then you have your space, then you define a variable that will take the first value of this list, so Rolf, and then you have in friends. That's the list that you want to go over. And what this allows you to do is to use this variable and make it equal to the first value in this list, and then run this code. When you reach the end of the indented code, it goes back to the top, and friend takes the second value. And then it runs this code, and then it goes back to the top, and friend takes the third value, and so on. When you reach the end, the for loop structure knows that you are done, and then it continues running the Python code from the next line onwards. So this is great when you want to do something for each element in a list or a tuple or a set and so on, and also when you want to repeat something a certain number of times. For example, here you know you have 4 elements in this list, so therefore this loop will run 4 times. If you wanted to run a loop 4 times and you didn't care to create a list of 4 elements, you can actually do for variable in range 4. And that is also going to allow you to repeat this code 4 times. Of course, the friend variable still is used. So if you run this code, you'll actually see that you get back 0 is my friend, 1 is my friend, 2 is my friend, 3 is my friend. Because when you do range 4, that creates something like a list where the first element is 0, the second one's 1, and so on. This is a construct that allows you to iterate over a list of numbers so that you can repeat the code a certain number of times. Usually though, for a for loop, you'll be using something like an existing list and do something with each element. Let's use a for loop to calculate the average grade of this class. So let's say we've got a list of grades where the numbers are 35, 67, 98, and 2 100s, and we have a variable total which is equal to 0. Then we also have an amount of grades, which is the length of the grades list, which gives us 5. What we want to do is use a for loop to modify this total variable and add to it each of these grades. How we do that is we say for grade, for example, in grades, and that creates a new variable that we're calling grade, although you can call it whatever you want, and it's going to help us go through each of the values in the grades list. Then we will say total plus equal grade, and this, by the way, I think we've not seen it before, but it's the same as doing total equal total plus grade. So it adds up the existing total plus the new grade and sets it back to total. You can do that, or you can do plus equal, it's the same thing. And then, after the for loop, once we've added them all together, we can print out the total divided by the amount, and that's going to give us the average. So if we run this piece of code here, you'll see the average is 80.0. Now I'll say at this point that you don't actually need a for loop for this specific piece of code, and this will help me introduce another function in Python, which is the sum function. Instead of doing all of this, you can actually say that the total is the sum of grades. Just as we have len to calculate the length of a list, sum calculates the addition of all the elements inside a list, or a tuple or a set, and so on. So here we have the total and the amount, and this does exactly the same thing without the need for a for loop. So you just kind of have to know that this exists if you want to use it, but my advice would be to pretty much search for everything. In Google or your search engine of choice, I would search, when I was starting, for how to add a list of numbers in Python. And that'll give you many answers, and one of them will teach you about this sum function. When you're doing anything else in Python, usually I would also search for everything. And that way you're going to be constantly absorbing new information and learning different ways of doing things. It's very often that programmers will try a very complicated solution at first because that's what we can build based on the building blocks that we already know. But there's usually better solutions out there, and by searching for them, you're going to be able to absorb that knowledge, as I said. That's it for this video, though. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.